Okay. Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to SerenityOS office hours. I think everything is good. Hey, they can hear and see me, presumably. Victory screech. I hope it's not super screechy, though, because I did have some trouble with the audio last night. Okay, no, it's all good. Should be all good, hopefully. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Friday, and we're going to do what we always do on Fridays, which is just talk about SerenityOS and all of the surrounding projects, of course. Hello, everybody. What's up, Pierre and Ixilum with the golden yaks? they just look so cute to me. I don't know. It's funny. I remember being very pleased with the golden yak, and I'm glad that it has found a new purpose. Let's see. So nice with all the people here. Okay, so let's take a question quickly here from Noob Saibot, who is asking, I've seen Herb Sutter's work on CPP2. Yes, I've seen Herb's presentation from CPPCon, I think it was, and it's definitely one of the transpile safer language to C++ efforts ongoing right now. I don't have anything really to say about it opinion-wise because I haven't actually messed with it myself. So I can just acknowledge that it exists, but I don't have any opinion. I guess I will say I'm glad that people are exploring transpilation solutions to the C++ problems. And it is interesting that so many groups of people, or multiple groups, sort of independently decided to explore transpilation and managed to make those things public within a couple of months of each other. So that's cool. What's up, Kenneth? And everybody else, Dami Killer, Miso, Andy, that Chris. Are you that Chris specifically? Raymar and Thomas, and the literal definition of bruh, of course. Not to forget Dami Killer. By the way, my wife said a few days ago that it's very funny whenever I pronounce this name on stream. whenever I say the literal definition of bruh, she's always like laughing in the other room. Sup, Milan? All right, so what we normally do here is chat asks questions or brings up something to look at in the code base, and then we sort of take it from there, organize around that. So that's what we're going to do today too. So Dot says, hi, Andreas. I've heard that you said you need inheritance/virtual dispatch in order to build UI systems while coding Rust. You've heard that I said that? I did not say that. What I said was that it's cumbersome. I find it cumbersome to build GUI applications with Rust because it's missing object-oriented concepts like inheritance and virtual dispatch through a implementation vtable. But I know, I'm fully aware that there are other ways of building GUIs that are popular, but those are not the types of GUIs that I want to build. So it's a bad fit for the type of development that I want to do, and that was what I commented about that. Of course, it is a little bit sad that you can't really comment on Rust and some other projects publicly without people taking it very personally. And I'm not saying that you're doing that, but when I made that remark, it generated like hundreds of responses, and there was a big Reddit thread about it and everything, and I didn't feel like I was saying anything even controversial. I was even saying I like Rust, but it is it's a difficult space to open your mouth in if you don't have anything like 100% positive to say. And I hope that SerenityOS never becomes that kind of space, because I would be very embarrassed if people would, swarm anybody saying anything about SerenityOS. Anyway, and just to clarify, like, it's not like anybody was mean or unpleasant about what I said about Rust. It's more like they're just very, very intensely eager to talk about it and tell you why you're wrong. Which, hey. Anyway, the literal definition of bruh says, I think the accent on bruh when you pronounce my username is amazing. And then goes on to say, what is the largest / most awkward function / variable name you've come across in the Serenity codebase? That's a good question. I don't know. I think honestly, it's probably one of the things that are forced on us by POSIX, like the stuff dealing with multi or wide characters, for example. There are some pretty awkward names. Or is it MemBC? I don't even remember what these things are called. These aren't actually that bad. I somehow remember worse things. I don't know what I'm thinking of. Like these multi-byte APIs. In general, in the Serenity codebase, we have a policy to use very long, descriptive, verbose names, and it's rare that you see somebody make that into something bad, because obviously the reason to use a longer name is so that you can pack valuable information into the long name. If you put a bunch of nonsense into the name and just make it long for the sake of making it long, yeah, that would be lame. But I don't know, like this. I think whenever I see something that would be like an awkward function or variable name or something, I almost always stop what I'm doing. Unless I'm recording a video, I'll stop what I'm doing and try to figure out a better name, maybe find the person who added it and see if we can find a better name. But for the most part, it doesn't happen that much. Let's see. Thomas says there's also a large segment of the C++ community that does not handle critique well. That's absolutely true. I think there's large segments of many large communities. Programming languages communities in general are they can be very tribal, let's say. And I think it's counterproductive in the great scheme of things to be tribal about a specific technology that you like and that you use, because you blind yourself to things that could be better about it, right? And that doesn't just go for technology, of course. Like if you just buy into the idea that the things that you like, the things that you use are perfect or infallible, then you miss out on ways to improve it that could come from anywhere. Andy Jonsson says, perhaps a bit off topic, but now that Twitter is having a rocky time, have you considered Mastodon? I see JT is already on it. Yeah, sure, I looked at Mastodon a bit, but honestly, it looks like way too much of a political echo chamber, I guess, to me. It seems that people on Mastodon are roughly like within one specific ideology, and they also seem very angry to me. So I don't really enjoy that type of space. And of course, there are people on there just talking about tech, but as a whole, the space seems very negative and very ideologically one-sided, and I don't want to be in that kind of environment. I like to be in a more of a melting pot environment. Let's see. Bart Pelly says, hi friend, what timer source is used in Serenity for task switch interrupts? That's a good question. Well, let's look into it. So we have a thing called time management in the kernel, which is sort of the mother class or whatever that manages time sources. So it should be responsible for locating various hardware timers and figuring out which ones we can use, and then picking one of them to use as the task switching time source, or the scheduler time source, I guess. And I forget what we call that. Is that what the system timer is? So I'm looking at time management initialize. And Epic timer. Okay, let's look for who calls scheduler tick. Scheduler timer tick. That's what I'm thinking of. So who calls timer tick? That is called by system timer tick. Okay. And who calls system timer tick? Well, time management probe and set x86 legacy hardware timers. Okay, that seems too specific. There should be some kind of more generic mechanism for this. Oh, is this M system timer set callback? Okay, so this is probably it. Or maybe it's not. I don't know. It's either HPET or one of the other time sources in x86. I'm not sure exactly, but if you dig through this code, I'm sure we can find it. But I don't know exactly the specifics. I think it depends on what hardware we detect. So if you have HPET, we probably use that. Otherwise, we'll fall back to some other one. But you can look at this code here in time management to figure out the specifics. Marlon says, how is Yakt doing? Yakt is doing pretty okay, I would say. I've spent a couple of days this week just working on it. What I was doing is trying to get it to coexist side by side with Serenity code, which turned out to be a huge hassle because of this kind of a mistake that we made with Yakt, which is we took a bunch of the C++ utility classes from the ACK library in Serenity, and actually, wait, I have a bunch of local changes here. Let me just stash them. So we took a bunch of stuff from Serenity and brought it over to Yakt, like, can you please work? Like optional. But then we made changes to them. And they are no longer identical to ACK optional, but instead it's become Yakt optional, which has like little tweaks here and there and some API changes and stuff. And we've done this with a bunch of stuff. And then when you try to bring Yakt and ACK together within the same program, there's a lot of clashing because they kind of, well, they use the same names for a lot of things, and there's global namespace collisions. It's all uninteresting, boring stuff that anybody could have seen coming, but we still did it, which was a huge mistake. So this week I spent a couple of days trying to get Yakt to build on top of ACK, so on top of Serenity. Instead of having its own standard library, just take the standard library changes that we made in Yakt, bring them back over into Serenity, and then sort of retarget Yakt on top of Serenity, if that makes sense. Which has been super tedious and uninteresting, and I'm almost there. Just need to fix a couple of linking errors and then fix the CMake files so that they can build this in the new way. But I'm optimistic that that's going to be a good thing. So that's how it's doing from my perspective. But then other people have been working on various aspects of it as well. I saw people working on the auto formatting stuff. We're pretty eager to get that running automatically so it can be part of CI. And I was also doing a bunch of like random fixes. And I implemented one new feature this week, which was, what was it called? This is binding. Yeah. No, this is not what I was thinking of. Mutable. Well, the thing that I did was that I allow you to bind to the inner, you bind the inner value of an enum when you're matching it. So if you want to match on this, you can now bind a mutable reference to the value inside, which allows you to edit the value inside of an enum. Previously, we had no way to do that, but now you can match and bind a mutable reference. So that's something I worked on this week. Anyway, I think it's doing well. It's just, it's kind of chaotic in my head because it's just, I'm so into this whole retargeting the standard library refactoring thing. Let's see. Thomas says, I like Rust a lot, but I haven't yet learned how to design a larger app architecture that matches its requirements. Yeah, I haven't done that either. Like, I haven't built anything large with Rust, just smaller things. So I don't really have insightful commentary on that. I will say that I know JT has a lot of experience with that kind of stuff and also does Rust training professionally. I think that's one of the main things that JT does professionally nowadays is just go around training people to build stuff with Rust. So I'm sure you can find good ideas from JT. Patty Mate says, people tend to forget that some things are simply subjective and there is no one definite truth. Yeah, very much. Let's see. Damikiller37 said, I watched your new Fix Me video this morning. Hopefully more to come. I like the surprise aspect of it. You never know what you will get. Yeah, that was a spooky format, but I loved it. I think I'm going to make more of those for sure because it's so straightforward. And I actually recorded 3 videos yesterday, but it turned out that the audio in the first 2 was unusable. So it was like the mic was too loud, so it just clipped and it was like unlistenable. So by the time I was recording the 3rd one, which is the one I published, I was pretty frustrated and just hoping to get something kind of easy to work on, and it turned out to be something manageable. But going forward with that kind of format, I think, I mean, it's obviously unrealistic to expect to be able to complete any arbitrary fix me. We have some fix me's that are, hiding multiple days of work. And I'm not going to be able to fix that within the scope of a single video. But I think the format can be that I have to pick a random fix me and then make some kind of progress on it, right? So it doesn't have to be completely fixed, but maybe I can figure out what's wrong, figure out what the next steps are, divide it into sub-steps or make some incremental progress, but not fully resolve it, whatever. But not saying, oh, I'm going to fix the fix me, but rather I'm going to make as much progress on it as I can within one video. Hopefully that will still be interesting. But yeah, I saw a bunch of people commenting on the video about like the possibility of getting something really, really awfully difficult. And I was very aware of that, but kind of lucked out. In fact, one of the unusable videos I recorded was like less than 5 minutes long because it was too simple. So that's also something that can happen. Let's see. Christopher says, if you had to pick one, which would it be? 1, you can only use 1 or more A's for variable names. Okay, 1 or more A's. All variables have to be 1 or more A's. Or 2, you can only program from a smartphone without any external hardware connected to it. Definitely the smartphone one. I'm not, when I see my little sister who's 10 years younger than me, when I see her typing on her phone, I feel so old because she's just going super fast and I don't know how she's doing it, and it comes out perfectly correct, and it's very impressive to me, and I can learn how to do that, but I haven't had a reason yet, but seeing that has made me think that it's probably possible to be very fast on a touch keyboard, but unless you give me a reason, like this obnoxious rule, then I'm unlikely to learn it anytime soon. But if I had to, I would definitely learn the touch typing thing on the screen. That's not what touch typing is. But anyway, Knut Al says, says, well, hello, friends. A bit of a different question. I will soon finish my master's degree in computer science. I'm trying to decide between working in management consulting or tech. What are your opinions on management consulting? I have never been a management consultant, so I have very limited insights about that. I've worked in places where they hired management consultants to come in and oversee improvements to the way we ran the company. And I was not paying enough attention to what they were doing and to be able to understand how they worked or what they did. So I think, honestly, I was pretty naive about it at the time and probably just, made jokes about it with coworkers and said like, oh, great, consultants are coming to tell us how inefficient we are. Ho, ho, ho. And I'm sure that I would think of it very differently today because I've grown up a lot since then. But I don't really have any good insight about management consulting other than thinking that it's probably not the worst thing to do if you can find a way to do it. In the abstract sense, if you step away from the specifics, I would imagine that getting some experience with tech or whatever type of field you're interested in consulting for management in, having some grounded real life experience with the type of job or with individual contributor jobs in the field you're into is probably helpful to anybody looking to consult in it. Like, I know that when we had management consultants come to businesses where I worked, whenever the consultant was somebody who had personal experience doing the kind of jobs that we did, we definitely paid more attention to what they were saying. But all of this is like very vague and loosey-goosey, so I'm not going to spend more time on saying this nonsense. But whatever you do, I wish you the best of luck. Joseph says, hello, friends. Hello to you, too. Justin Siegel says, where do you get your computer backgrounds from? They are one of the things I look forward to seeing when you post a new video. So honestly, it's pretty boring, but what I tend to do is just go to Google image search. So here, and I just search for like cool wallpaper and maybe like 1990s or something like that. And I get some interesting options and then get some ideas for other stuff I could look for and then search a couple of times. But yeah, it tends to be Google image search for the most part. Sam Atkins says, ooh, the Yakt Serenity Singularity is coming then. Very cool. That is hopefully a thing that can come. Yeah. To be honest, I think out of all the parts that we have to do, the CMake stuff is the only thing that I feel like I struggle with. Like everything else I understand how to make progress, but when it comes to CMake, it so often feels like I hit a wall because I don't understand CMake well enough. And I think I need to do some personal development there and invest some time into actually learning more about CMake, because relying on other people to fix CMake for me all the time, I don't feel good about that. Shout outs to Andrew, who's always fixing CMake for me. Let's see. see. The literal definition of bruh says, with things getting more and more uncertain for centralized internet services, what do you think about making a microblog section, stuff that you would put on Twitter for your website with an RSS feed? Maybe. I don't know. I think at the end of the day, I'm optimistic about most things, and that includes Twitter. And it's just, optimism is just my default state. It's not that I have any insight or any skin in the game. It's more that I just, I want things to succeed, and I hope that things go well, but I don't necessarily feel like everything is falling apart. I know that people are saying that, but there's like a limited small group that's saying it. So outside of that, like the world is just carrying on. So I don't know. But anyway, for my website, putting a microblog section, if hypothetically the Twitter service were to actually disappear, then I wouldn't mind having something like that. But if it doesn't, then I'm not sure really what the use would be. If anything, I could just put a widget there that aggregates my Twitter posts, I guess. Mystic says, I think Fix Me videos will become a Yakt documentary. That is also very possible. Certainly that's what happened with the thing I posted yesterday, because I made a handful of little mistakes, and then people noticed and left comments and commented on the PR and everything, and we were able to make the changes even better. So that was really awesome. And I think we can put, even though I'm like purposely baiting myself by definition in the Fix Me video format, I think I can also turn it into a way to bait others. So yeah, I'm very optimistic about the format, and I'm super happy that people like it, because I wasn't sure if people would, because I mean, it's kind of hit and miss, right? Because you might also get a really uninteresting or boring thing to work on, but maybe the thrill of the randomness just makes everything interesting. We'll see. Prenom Nom says, have you ever used Go? What do you think about it? I have not used Go for more than a couple of minutes, so I don't have sophisticated opinions about that. Let's see. Knut said, thank you for the answer. Oh, that was about management consulting. It was more insightful than you probably felt. Always nice to get insights from somebody with different experiences from me. Well, thank you for saying that. That is, that's definitely true. Like, it's so interesting to hear from people who are different than you, right? I think when I was in rehab, one of the things that we talked about was that, or my therapist there would talk about, was that, that there's something that you can learn from every person that you meet, right? Everybody that you meet knows at least one thing that you don't. And it's it helped me a lot to see the world differently, because I used to prefer hanging out only with people who were exactly like me and had the same interests, the same exact values, same background, same type of career and whatever. And I think it was a detriment to everything. Anyway, Kook said, are there no plans? No, there are no plans. I could disregard the rest of your question, but I'm not going to. Are there no plans to replace CMake with a solution as part of Yakt? Languages like Zig and Rust have their own build systems. There are no plans to do anything in particular. I know that some people have been kicking around the idea of doing build system in Yakt, but it's not something I'm personally super interested in. But if it becomes something where we think we can do something way better, way easier than the existing solutions, then sure. But at the moment, we have like more fundamental problems. So I feel like we need to tackle those first and then see what simmers up to the top, if that makes sense. Sam says, oh no, if you learn CMake, then Andrew will be out of a job. I'm sure we can find something else for Andrew to do. No, there will never be enough CMake knowledge. I think it just seems like this thing that it has great depth, and somehow it's not very interesting to most people, myself included, and I can't even articulate why. Yeah. Let's see. Jason L says, hey, I'm often caught watching the replay of the streams and miss the opportunity to ask questions. Have you considered allowing people to post questions before the next stream? So actually, I have not really thought about that as a thing, but I do have the Car Talk thing. That was just another video format that it's not interactive, but I have been asking people to send me questions or subjects to talk about in the car. And I don't actually have a lot of subjects for that yet, so I would love to receive more. But I guess it's still not very interactive if I do that, right? So having a way to ask questions for the next stream could be good. Of course, for the interactive part, if the issue is that you can't be there anyway, then it doesn't matter if it's interactive or not. So maybe it would make perfect sense to do those as car talks, because then I also don't have to deal with like the very distracting chat while I try to think about a good answer to a specific question. Not that I don't love chat, it's just that I find it very difficult to spend too much time on a single thing before feeling like, oh, I have to catch up to what's happening here. It's a strange thing to manage this box here with all the folks in it. But I really appreciate that you're all in here, so thank you for that. Damikiller37 said that I'd say the boring and uninteresting issues are the best to tackle, since those are likely to not get the attention and remain unsolved the longest. That's true. That is probably true. Yeah, I mean, there's, what was it, like 3,700 something fix me's in the Serenity code base. And I bet you my instinctive feeling to looking at most of them would probably be, this is not that interesting, or like, oh, I don't know exactly what to do with this. So turning it on its head, where you don't have a choice whether you deal with it or not, I think could be very interesting. Let's see. Dev said, hey, are you a fan of Agile? Curious on your opinion about this. I have not used Agile that much. I've been on some teams where we try to adopt some Agile, and I've had like coworkers that I sat next to who were in Agile teams, but I never ended up on a team doing Agile directly. So I don't have firsthand experience of like fully fleshed out Agile. From the outside, it always seemed to me a bit like, I don't know, a bit stressful and like micromanagement, I guess. But I guess there's probably a reason that so many companies choose to do it, or so many teams working on all kinds of things choose to use the methodology. I would assume it's because it does them some good, but I couldn't comment on how well it works or not because I don't have enough experience. Vignesh says, I just wanted to say that your channel and coding videos give me the motivation to work on my own projects whenever I feel down. Thank you for your work. Thank you, Vignesh, for saying that. I really appreciate it. um, if somebody is feeling down and we can lift them up with programming, I think that's pretty cool. Because if I think back on all the times in my life when I felt down or felt bad, it was almost always the case that programming was like the highlight of those times. Like that was the time when I felt the most like myself and when I was having the most just pure innocent fun, was when I was doing some kind of programming. And I'm really glad to be able to meet other people around the world who have that same feeling that like programming brings them joy or is something good in their lives. Teeny says, that sounds like every Agile team. Does it? Yeah, I mean, the thing that stood out to me the most about the people I worked with who were doing Agile was that it felt like they were always in these stand-up meetings, and they were always talking about their backlogs, and it seemed like very, very micromanagement heavy to me. And I've had perhaps the good fortune of being mostly on teams that were more like free-flowing and able to just work on whatever the higher level goals were, and we were working towards those. And then people had a lot of freedom within those high level goals to pick and choose what they did, at least for parts of the yearly development cycle. For example, at Apple, that was quite interesting, the way that they managed the teams I was on was that it's almost like the year had two halves, and you had one half where we did feature development. So we just burst out as much new feature code as we could, or in my case, I didn't do feature development in that part of the cycle. I did performance work, so like all kinds of optimizations and building architecture for optimizations, and trying to get all that done in the feature part of the cycle. And then we just switched to bug burn down, I think they called it. And then you spend like the other half of the year just trying to fix as many bugs as possible and prioritizing bugs and stuff. But even within those, even within that period, it was still pretty free form. Like you had a list of 100 bugs or whatever at the start of the burn down, and then it would shrink as people would cut the low priority bugs and leave people with the high priority stuff. And then, yeah, somehow we managed to release macOS and iOS every year, which was a pretty impressive thing to see from the inside, honestly. There was a time when they got a little too excited and tried to do one additional release in the same period. So they wanted to do like a mid-year release as well, which ended up not happening because they realized in the middle of that it just couldn't. It was too much, so they backtracked and it never got released. But it was an ambitious time. Anyway, Neuromancer Void says, did you read Joel Spolsky's blog back in the day? Yes, of course. I read Joel on Software. Every 90s kid read Joel on Software, I think. Joel on Software, still there? Still there, yes. It looks a little different. I haven't been here in many years, I have to admit. But yeah, I did read Joel Spolsky. And I always thought it was a very good blog back in the day. He was a pioneer. I was actually... There was this thing a while back with fog bugs, right? Somebody bought fog bugs, which was the one of the things that Joel's company was doing, I think. And somebody bought it, and they started trying to nickel and dime the user base by like switching all the users to like a paid account, even though they hadn't been active for like 10 years or something like that. It was the first time I thought about Joel in many years, and it was a little bit sad to see what was happening with his fog bugs. Anyway, Kenneth said that I think it makes prioritizing easier and easier to help developers deliver smaller parts, but I dislike when Agile becomes too rigid and religious. Yeah, maybe that's the thing. Like it helps you if you're really good at splitting work up into smaller parts. Having a process to do that where you detail what all the small parts are, then you can follow up on all of that in a very management friendly way, I think. So I definitely see why people in management would like Agile. But as you say, if it becomes really rigid and religious and people are doing things because they're supposed to rather than because of some actual benefit that they can articulate, then yeah, it's gone a little too far. But again, like, since I don't have personal experience with Agile for real, I don't want to crap on it, because maybe it is as amazing as people say. I don't know. Or maybe it is as amazing as some management says. Let's see. B-Man says, hello, friends. Nice to catch the live stream. Hope you all have an awesome weekend. What's up, B-Man? Nice to see you here. Let's see. Andy said, I didn't. I just complained that Agile doesn't really exist anymore. The practices the corporations label as Agile definitely isn't Agile. Yeah, that's probably also true. I mean, at the end of the day, companies always have to adapt, even when they take a nicely packaged methodology from the outside and try to adapt it to whatever development work they're doing. It's still going to have customizations, because every company is ultimately its own unique thing, right? Although I guess there are probably companies that did Agile from the start. I wonder if that's something you can read about somewhere, maybe. Everybody's sharing their feelings on Agile. Simon says, rigid and religious. Rigid and religious sounds very Agile. Lofty says, we do Agile at my company, and it feels like Agile is something we're trying to stick to without thinking about why. This is the only company I've worked for, so I don't know what it would be like outside of Agile. Yeah, I wonder if with something like this, that we're just sort of in the Agile time window right now, and 20 years from now, there will be some new thing that everybody does, and nobody's quite sure if they're doing the thing properly. And I don't know what it will be called. Maybe flexible or something like that. By the way, YouTube thinks that we should look at an ad, but we're not going to. I'm just letting you know. What's up, Amedreda? Neuromancer Void says, I think you mentioned that you worked with Visual Basic back in the day. Do you remember learning about having a VM running underneath your code? And what did you think about that at first? I think I didn't understand that for a long time. I think the first time I learned about it was it maybe in VB5 that had, you could compile to P code. You could choose if you wanted to compile to P code or to native code. And I think that was the first time I came into contact with, like, wait a minute, it doesn't compile to native code? And in the compile options for, maybe it was Visual Basic 6, they had like, you could choose code generation options. And I was like, what the heck is P code? And back then, I didn't have like always on internet access like we do now. So back then, the way you would look stuff up like this was, I had MSDN, which came on CDs back then. So it was like 8 CDs or whatever full of Microsoft documentation. And you could browse them on your machine. MSDN CDs. This was honestly super awesome. And at least back then it was super awesome. I loved it. And I find myself missing that type of thing sometimes, like having a huge offline library of this type of documentation, because the closest thing I feel like we have today is man pages, but they are kind of stuffy, right? And terminal only. So that's actually something that is an inspiration to me in building the help system for SerenityOS. Although it's also obviously very heavily influenced by sort of the Windows 95, Windows 98 help system. But I would like to expand on it and sort of bring in some concepts from the 90s MSDN style documentation systems. Good times. Bart says, no ads, voluntarily missing out on revenue. Indeed. But then he joined the Yak herd. Thank you very much for that. See? So now we didn't need the ad. Really appreciate the support. Thank you, Bart. Ahmed Reda says, how can I be an expert C++ developer? The best thing you can do for that is to write a lot of C++ and work together with other people on C++ projects. I think those are the two main things that will drive you forward. And then there's like secondary stuff, like reading books, watching conference talks, listening to podcasts and whatever. All of that stuff, reading the blogs, all of that stuff is good. But the thing that matters the most is just practice, right? Writing a lot of C++ and collaborating with other people on C++ code so that you can learn not just by practice yourself, but also learn from collaboration. Working with other people will expose you to a lot of ideas and patterns that you otherwise would not come across. So I think that's very important. Mogest. That is a name I'm not sure how to pronounce. Mogest or Mogest. I'm going to go with Mogest. Says, Agile started as a manifesto, which pretty much matches the way you work now, Andreas. Release small chunks of work, get feedback from your users, always be iterating and improving. ABI. A-B-I-A-I. Right. Always be iterating and improving. Then it was adopted by corporates and turned into a set of processes that have little to do with the original Agile principles. I fully believe that. Yeah. I can totally see that. I'm sure that there's a book somewhere about Agile that I could read that would illuminate me. And maybe I should. At the same time, I know that even if I knew which book it was, I probably wouldn't read it because I would just do programming instead. But yes, Armo says, MSDN and also the online MS resources, they were very useful and very in-depth. They totally were. They were really good. In fact, I sometimes still find myself on MSDN, especially when looking up stuff related to TrueType font format, because they have some super good documentation about how the various font formats work. I don't know where else to find that kind of great info about that. Let's see. Christopher says, does YouTube or GitHub take the largest cut of membership/sponsorship? GitHub takes 0%. So they are by far the smallest cut in every category. They are so small, in fact, that when you first join, they even match, or at least they did when I started, they match the first $5,000 that you get in support, they match. So if somebody sponsors you for $10, they add on another $10 until they've added 5,000, at which point they stop. But none of the other services are remotely close to GitHub when it comes to that. So it's the most beneficial from my side. That said, if you sign up for GitHub sponsorship, I'm unable to show a cool golden yak on your name here on YouTube. So there's pros and cons to the various services. But either way, like, to be clear, I appreciate all forms of support that I get, whether it's the sponsorships, but also people just hang out or help out on the code base or help people on Discord or whatever. Like, it's all good. I appreciate all the help. Let's see. Christopher says, I've already been sponsoring you for a while there. I was just curious if YouTube was better. Well, thank you very much for the support. I really appreciate that. YouTube, GitHub is 0 fees. And I think they even said that they will always be 0 fees. Although I think I know better than to trust a company with something like that. But I feel like they did say that at some point. Kook says, how do you get started collaborating with other people on projects? Well, there are a couple of different ways to do that. I think one of the, if you have a specific project in mind that, if it's a big project, then they probably have people joining all the time. So they have some sort of a funnel or process for that, right? But for smaller projects, I found that the easiest way to get started is when you file a bug about something, like, oh, I think this feature is missing, or I think this bug exists in your software, then you can kind of make yourself available. You can say like, oh, I'm happy to work on this if you just give me some guidance, right? And what I would recommend is to try to find if there's a community around the project you want to work on, if they have some kind of a social space. So if they have a Discord or Slack or IRC channel or something like that, or mailing list where you can just go and hang out and kind of soak yourself into the community. And I had a video, I guess it was over a year ago now, where I talked about the difference between contributing and participating in open source. And I think it's important to participate if you want the full experience. And by that, I mean to really embed yourself into the community of the project you want to work on. So hang out with them socially on chat platforms and read, read other people's pull requests and read the commits that are going in and stuff like that, and actively participate. And wait, what were you asking originally? I feel like I'm answering a question that's not exactly what you asked. You said, how do you get started collaborating with other people on projects? So maybe what you meant was, how do you start working on something together with another person? But that's more, if that's what you're asking, that's more of a social question, I guess. But basically, you can either join an existing project where they have something going on, or you can start something and then open it up for other people to participate in. And anything that you put out in public on the internet is potentially an open source community tomorrow, right? You never know. But if you have some interesting idea, just start hacking on it, put it online, see what happens. That's what I did with SerenityOS. Ultimately, I'm just some guy who wrote a bunch of code, put it online, and people thought it was fun enough that they wanted to hack on it too. And I think anybody can do that. And that's kind of the beauty of open source, is that anybody can have a cool idea and turn it into a community. It's just something that happens. Anyway, let me catch up. So Kuberlog, the cyber ranging hacker, it's a very elaborate nickname, says, do you enjoy 3D graphics programming? I don't think I've done enough of it to say if I enjoy it or not. I remember when Half-Life came out, now I'm going to sound old, but like when Half-Life came out, I remember being so impressed with 3D graphics that I wanted to learn how to make a 3D game. So I did this OpenGL programming tutorial back then. And that was almost like the last time I did 3D graphics programming. So it must have been in like 98 or something. And I mean, I've touched 3D code since then, but I never tried to build anything myself from scratch in 3D. I don't know. So maybe the answer is that I don't like it, or I didn't catch the bug where I got like super into it. But I like what you can do with the power of 3D acceleration hardware. I think that's very cool. Like taking 3D hardware and using it to do 2D really fast, that really appeals to me. So I do have stuff that I want to do with that, definitely. Let's see. Neuromancer Void says, did you or do you play video game consoles? If so, what was your first or most memorable one? I was a Nintendo kid, so got an NES, I think when I was 6 years old or something like that. And played the Mario games and Duck Hunt and all of those things. That was the first and probably most memorable. Like everybody remembers their first gaming console, obviously. And I still play. Currently playing on PS4. So I've been playing the From Software catalog in the last, I guess I spent the last year catching up on the From Software catalog. So the Dark Souls games, Bloodborne, Sekiro, Elden Ring, all that stuff. I've just been playing those games to death over and over the last year. Let's see. Matthew Purnell says, do you have any experience with or thoughts on pair programming? Sure. I've done some pair programming, and I think it's pretty great. I think it's a really good way to learn from somebody else, is to sort of actively work on something together. Because it's one thing to talk about programming and sort of asynchronously help each other, but to sit down and synchronously do something together is very, very educational, I think. And I've certainly learned a ton of random stuff doing that. And in the last year, I was using the Tuple app sometimes, which it's like a remote pair programming app, and it's pretty cool. So I was using that on Mac OS and on Linux, although the Linux support is still a bit immature. But there are many solutions. That's one, and I've kind of enjoyed using it. Let's see. Vitriol says, how long did it take you to be able to load user programs inside your kernel? I don't know how long that took. I think probably a week or two or something like that. It was like one of the first things I wanted to do. When I was first slapping together the kernel, it was like, step 1, boot. Step 2, have multiple processes. Step 3, read from the hard drive. Step 4, read something from the hard drive and read an executable from the hard drive and turn that into a running process, right? So it was one of the very first things that I tried to do. It didn't work super correctly at first, but it did something. So it was a very early kind of thing. Jason L says, what's the largest refactor you've done in Serenity? That is probably the garbage collector refactoring I did a couple of weeks ago. So it used to be the case that the browser engine had a lot of reference counted objects in C++, and that created a bunch of lifetime management problems when coupled with garbage collectors. And the solution to all of that was to turn all of those C++ reference counted objects into garbage collected objects. And that was a very, very large and tedious refactoring, but now the platform object in libweb is a JS object. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's much easier to reason about object lifetimes in the web engine now that almost all of it is managed by the garbage collector, or the majority of interesting object graphs are managed by the garbage collector. But that took several weeks to do that refactoring. And it was like, I think it was the first thing that I've done in Serenity that reminded me of these long running refactors that I used to do in WebKit back when I worked on that. Because in WebKit, if you want to do something even medium sized, it often takes a very long time because there's just so much code that has to be updated. Entropy 404 says, have you seen Gambas? Gambas. It's a form of BASIC. Yes, I have seen a Gambas. I haven't looked them up for a long time. Oh, shrimp. It's a Linux software, or Unix software, I guess. Sort of similar to Visual Basic, but not exactly compatible. I remember playing with this more than 10 years ago. So it seems like they're still going strong. That's very cool. But I have never tried to use it for anything, but I'm aware of it and I think it's neat. Armo says, will we see more Yakt videos soon? I hope so. I hope so. Kuberlog says, what do you think of life simulation and evolutionary algorithms? No strong feelings. I can't say that it's something I have experience with. I've played the game of life and learned some of the basic things you can build, but I didn't find it particularly fun. But I can see how somebody would enjoy it. Neuromancer Void says, have you heard of the book Racing the Beam by E.M. Bogost and Nick Montfort about the Atari 2600 game development challenges? I have not. That sounds very interesting. I should check that out. Speaking of game history, though, JT sent me this thing earlier today that I was watching, which was Final Fantasy 14 documentary. So I'm going to tell everybody to check this out. I think this was surprisingly interesting. I haven't played the game, but I just thought, oh, that's not a very good URL. I haven't played the game, but the documentary about the making of the game is super interesting so far. So I'm just going to share it with you folks if you're interested. Basically, they made a game that was bad at first, and then they managed to turn it around and make it good. And some folks made a documentary about that, interviewing the people working on the game, and that's very cool. Pattymate says, did you have lördagsgodis as a child? Of course I did. I tried to reintroduce lördagsgodis into my life a while back, but it went too far and I had to stop. Lördagsgodis, by the way, for the non-Swedish people among us, is a tradition we have in Sweden where on Saturdays, or lördag, we eat a lot of godis, or candy. So it's Saturday candy. And yeah, the way it worked in my family was that we would only have candy on Saturdays, and you would look forward to it the entire week. Ixilam says that he has fredagsostbågar, which is Friday cheese doodles, which sounds lovely. Venkatesh says, hi, Andreas, bro. Well, hi, Venkatesh, bro. What is your answer to people who are afraid of breaking production code in the process of refactoring and do not touch the code? Well, my answer is don't refactor in production. You know, if you want to do refactoring, you want to do it in your development environment, not in your production environment. I think that is the answer to that. And then the best protection when you're refactoring is testing. Like, the more tests you have, the more comfortable it gets to refactor, because tests give you confidence, or increase your confidence that your refactoring is still correct, right? So the more tests, the more comfortable refactoring in general. And then Pattymate says that he's still doing lördagsgodis, presumably, and I'm very happy for you that you can do that. For me, I can't. It just goes too far, and I just get too much candy. Anyways, I gotta go. So thank you all for coming to office hours. And thank you for all the lovely questions and the banter. If you end up working on SerenityOS this weekend, please come hang out on Discord and share what you're working on so that we can all enjoy. And outside of that, if you have questions that would make a good car talk, just drop a comment on any of my videos saying a question for car talk or something like that, so that I will get it, or email it to me, or send it somewhere. I don't know. All right. See you all next time, and have a great weekend. Bye.